सबसे बड़ी की के साइड में फ्रिज आती है। पुलिस सभी की नेक ले लिया। इस पर छोड़ टॉस क्यों रहती है? टेबलिश डोर के सेटेड।
I'm afraid we're ending your employment, effective immediately. Here are the details. This letter confirms the phasing out of your role, effective today. We've detailed the next steps here.
I understand you're terminating my position, but this email clearly shows a pattern of discrimination. This is wrong.
Isim imapni chibudi bogi kunhine. Lorren ligam ne apol bike repeat kodini. Atin kiri majurdi sabdi suki sabdi chara.
We have to let you go, effective immediately. Here are the severance papers.
Hey, look at me. It's gonna be okay, man. We'll figure this out.
Tyler's hands shook as he clutched the report. The numbers on the page blurred, the text mocking him as he stood in front of the CEO's office door. His breath quickened. Today was supposed to be different. Today was supposed to be the day he got the promotion he'd been working for, the recognition he deserved. Instead, he'd just been handed a document, a letter from the CEO, James McAllister, detailing his performance issues and threatening termination. A cold sweat slid down his spine. He took a deep breath, forced himself to knock. "Come in." McAllister's voice echoed from the other side. Tyler stepped inside, trying to steady his trembling legs. McAllister didn't even look up from his desk. His broad, expensive office with its sleek glass windows offered no refuge and attention in the air. "Tyler," McAllister said with feigned concern, his eyes still focused on his phone. "We've had some complaints about your performance lately. It's not working out. You've got to go." Tyler's pulse surged. His mouth went dry. He fought the urge to yell. "What complaints? I've met every deadline, every target, every single one." His voice was a strained whisper of defiance. McAllister looked up, his lips curling into a thin, dismissive smile. "I don't have to explain myself to you. It's not personal." Tyler clenched his jaw, the weight of the words sinking in. Not personal? It never was. The door slammed shut behind him as he left, but the burn of injustice stayed, hotter than ever. Tyler had a decision to make. He wasn't going down like this. Tyler stood in front of the polished glass door, his fingers tightly gripping the termination letter. His chest felt tight, and the words on the page swirled in front of his eyes. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not today. Not after all the years of hard work, the long nights, the sacrifices. He had always believed that if he just did his job well, if he exceeded expectations, the promotion would come. But this was a gut punch. "Come in, Tyler." The voice from behind the door echoed, as cold and impersonal as the rest of the office. Tyler stepped forward, his feet heavy, his heart pounding in his chest. He opened the door and walked into the spacious corner office of James McAllister, CEO of Axiom Tech. The office, with its sweeping view of the city and sleek modern decor, felt like a fortress, a place where people like Tyler were never meant to feel welcome. McAllister didn't even look up from his desk. He was busy typing on his laptop, his fingers moving mechanically across the keyboard. The only acknowledgement he gave Tyler was the barely audible shift of his eyes to the side. "Tyler, we've been reviewing your performance," McAllister began, his voice smooth and practiced, the kind of tone that belonged to someone who had perfected the art of corporate dismissal. "And unfortunately, we've decided it's just not working out." Tyler's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "I've met every deadline. I've hit every target. My numbers." McAllister raised a hand, cut him off before Tyler could finish. "It's not just about the numbers. There have been concerns about your behavior, complaints about your attitude in meetings, the way you interact with others. We just think it's best to part ways." Tyler's mouth went dry, and he could feel his pulse pounding in his ears. Attitude? Behavior? How many times had he spoken up in meetings? How many times had his ideas been dismissed without a second thought? How many times had he been the only black man in the room, fighting to make himself heard? Complaints? From who? Tyler managed to force out, his voice shaking. McAllister finally looked up, his icy blue eyes meeting Tyler's. He was wearing a faint smile, the kind of smile that only those in power could wear without fear of reprisal. "Tyler, You don't need to know all the details. We've made our decision. You've been given plenty of chances, but clearly it's just not a good fit. Tyler's jaw tightened, a rush of anger and disbelief flooding his veins. This wasn't just about performance. He knew it. The unspoken truth hung in the air, thick and suffocating. He had seen it before. The way McAllister looked at him, the way his suggestions were always overlooked, the way his presence was barely acknowledged in the boardroom. This wasn't about his work ethic. It was about something else entirely. Something he wasn't willing to accept anymore. "I don't accept this," Tyler said, his voice barely above a whisper. But the steel in it was undeniable. He set the termination letter down on McAllister's desk, his hands trembling as they rested against the polished wood. "I've worked too damn hard to let you push me out like this." McAllister's smile didn't falter. "It's not personal, Tyler. I'm just doing what's best for the company. You should have seen this coming." Tyler's mind raced. He wanted to scream, to throw the letter back in McAllister's face, but he knew that wouldn't change anything. It would just make him look like another angry black man, dismissed and disregarded. He needed something more, something that would get his voice heard. But what? Best for the company? Tyler repeated, his voice cold. "This isn't just about the company, is it? This is about me, about people like me. You've been looking for an excuse to get rid of me for a long time." McAllister's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, the mask slipped, revealing the disdain hidden beneath the surface. "I don't have to explain myself to you. It's done." Tyler stood there for a moment, stunned, before he turned on his heel and walked out of the office. The door slammed shut behind him, and he stood in the hallway, his hands clenched into fists. His heart raced, and for the first time, he felt the weight of every moment he'd endured in that office. The microaggressions, the quiet dismissals, the feeling of being invisible, all of it came crashing down. But this was not over, not by a long shot. Tyler had been underestimated before. It wouldn't happen again. As he walked back to his desk, his mind raced. He wasn't going to let McAllister get away with this. He was going to fight, and he wasn't going to stop until he exposed the truth. Tyler sat at his desk, staring blankly at the glowing screen in front of him. The termination letter, now crumpled in his hand, felt like an unbearable weight. The office around him seemed so small, suffocating even, as if the walls themselves were closing in. He had always known, deep down, that his time at Axiom Tech was coming to an end. But not like this, not without a fight, and certainly not with the unspoken truth gnawing at him like a bitter poison. He took a long breath, trying to calm the rising storm within him. The hum of the fluorescent lights above was like a constant reminder of his isolation. His co-workers moved in and out of the open plan office, their voices muted, their faces indifferent. Not one of them looked his way, as if his presence didn't matter at all. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, but his mind kept wandering. It wasn't the first time he'd felt the sting of discrimination at work. There had always been subtle slights, little things that seemed insignificant to everyone else, but felt like a punch to his gut every single time. "Hey, can you grab that file for me? I know you're good at organizing things." The words still echoed in his head from a few weeks ago, when Sarah, a colleague, had asked him to help her with something that wasn't part of his job description. Again, she always asked him to do things like that, and when he did them, it was like he was invisible in every meeting. His ideas, his contributions, always went unnoticed. And then there were the looks, the ones that lasted just a fraction of a second longer than they should have. The way people would walk past him, not making eye contact, avoiding his gaze as if he was somehow beneath them. Tyler clenched his fists, fighting back the anger that bubbled up in his chest. He wanted to scream, but he knew it wouldn't do any good. Screaming never changed anything. The world would just turn its back and pretend it hadn't heard. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a text from Marcus. "You okay? You need to talk." Tyler exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. He knew Marcus was right. He needed to talk. He needed someone to hear him, to understand the frustration he'd been carrying for so long. He quickly typed a reply. "I'm not okay. McAllister just fired me. No reason." Just like that. A moment later, Marcus's response came through. "What? That's bullshit, bro. You've been busting your ass. You can't let them get away with this. Tyler's heart pounded. The anger he'd been bottling up for so long started to surge again, hotter this time. He couldn't just let this slide. Not this time. He wasn't going to let McAllister, or anyone, make him feel small anymore. He'd seen the way things worked at Axiom Tech, the way they treated people like him, the way they expected him to be grateful just to have a seat at the table. He wasn't going to let it go. He couldn't. Tyler stood up, his chair scraping against the floor with a loud, jarring sound. He glanced at his colleagues, but none of them seemed to notice his outburst. To them, he was just another cog in the machine, a black man who would never quite fit in, no matter how hard he worked. He was a face they couldn't see, a name they couldn't remember. He grabbed his coat from the back of his chair and stormed out of the office, his steps quick and purposeful. He needed to get out of there, away from the suffocating feeling that had begun to cloud his mind. As he made his way to the elevator, he pulled out his phone again, this time calling Marcus. "Yo!" Marcus answered after a few rings, his voice thick with concern. "You all right?" Tyler took a deep breath. "No, man, I'm not. McAllister just fired me. He didn't even give me a reason, just some crap about performance. But I know it's more than that. I've been here for 5 years, working my ass off, and now he's just throwing me away." Marcus's voice was filled with anger. "That's not right, bro. You know it's not. This shit happens all the time. I told you from the start that they were treating you differently. I've seen it too, the way they dismiss you in meetings, the way they never really listen to you. You've been pushing so hard to prove yourself, but they were never going to give you a fair shot." Tyler's throat tightened. He hadn't told Marcus everything. He hadn't talked about the small, daily indignities, the way his colleagues would dismiss his suggestions without even acknowledging them, or how his ideas would be praised only when they came from someone else. But Marcus had seen it. He had always seen it. "I'm not letting them get away with this," Tyler said, the words burning with determination. "I'm going to fight. I'm going to file a complaint. I'm going to expose this for what it is. It's time people knew the truth." Marcus was silent for a moment, and then his voice was steady. "I got your back, bro. You don't have to do this alone." Tyler nodded. Even though Marcus couldn't see him, for the first time in what felt like forever, he felt a spark of hope. He wasn't alone. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't imagining the way they treated him. And he wasn't going to let them silence him. "Thanks, man," Tyler said, his voice firm. "I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I swear." As the elevator doors closed, Tyler took one last look at the building that had been both his prison and his battleground. The fight was just beginning, but he knew now that he wasn't going to back down. Tyler sat across from Amanda White, her office walls lined with legal textbooks and certificates, but none of that made him feel at ease. There was something about her calm, no-nonsense demeanor that felt like an oasis of clarity in the storm of confusion that was swirling inside him. Amanda's eyes were sharp, her gaze calculating as she listened to Tyler recount his firing. He had already given her the basics, but now, as he spoke the words out loud, the pain, the injustice, began to resurface in full force. He hadn't realized just how much he had internalized the insults, the dismissals, the subtle ways he was made to feel invisible until he started putting it all together. "Let me get this straight," Amanda said, her voice firm but empathetic. "You were fired for performance issues, but your work was consistently praised before. You've been in meetings where your ideas were shut down or ignored, and you've been the only person in those rooms who looks like you." Tyler nodded, feeling his chest tighten. "Exactly. It wasn't just about the work. It was the way I was treated, the way I was never really seen." Amanda leaned forward, her fingers steepling together. "You're not imagining things. This sounds like classic racial discrimination. It's insidious, the kind that flies under the radar and can be incredibly difficult to prove. But it's there. We're dealing with microaggressions, bias evaluations, and a lack of equal opportunity. What they're doing isn't just unfair, it's illegal." Tyler swallowed hard. "So what now?" "Now we gather evidence," she said matter-of-factly. "We start by looking at your performance reviews, emails, and any communications that can substantiate your claim. If we can show a pattern of mistreatment, we might have grounds for a discrimination lawsuit." "But Tyler," She paused, letting her words hang in the air like a weight. This is going to take time, and it won't be easy. You'll have to dig deep, and it could get ugly. Corporate America doesn't like to lose, especially not on something like this. Tyler felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He knew this wouldn't be easy. He'd seen how quickly things could spiral out of control for people like him. He could already picture McAllister's smug face, the dismissive tone that would undoubtedly come with every attempt to defend himself. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Amanda asked, her voice softer now, a quiet understanding in her eyes. "It's going to cost you more than just your job. It could cost you peace of mind, relationships at work, and even your reputation." Tyler hesitated. His first instinct was to walk away, to move on and pretend like none of it had ever happened. But the fire inside him wouldn't let him. He couldn't just let it go, not when it had been happening for so long, not when McAllister had crossed a line that couldn't be erased. "I have to do this," Tyler said, his voice steady, though his hands were clenched into fists. "I'm not just doing this for me. I'm doing it for everyone who's been pushed to the side, for everyone who's ever had their voice ignored, their worth questioned, just because of who they are." Amanda nodded approvingly, as though she'd already seen resolve forming inside him. "Good. Let's get started." The next few weeks were a blur of legal meetings, document gathering, and late nights spent sifting through his emails and performance reviews. Tyler's apartment felt quieter than ever, the silence echoing around him as he scrolled through page after page of data, looking for something, anything, that would prove what he had known all along. He collected evidence of his work performance, the glowing reviews from past supervisors, and even a few emails from colleagues that confirmed his consistent contributions to projects. But Tyler knew that wasn't enough. He needed more, something tangible that showed the discrimination he had faced. One afternoon, as he was going through an old email thread, he found it, a chain of messages between McAllister and a senior VP, discussing Tyler's promotion, or rather, the lack of one. It was subtle, the kind of conversation that could easily be overlooked if you weren't looking for it. McAllister had written that Tyler wasn't ready for a leadership role, despite having been with the company for years and outperforming his peers. The VP, a man named Carl Jacobs, had agreed, though they had both praised Tyler's work ethic. What struck Tyler, though, was the unspoken undertone in the way they had discussed him. Not ready? McAllister had never had any problem with the white employees in his team, despite similar performance levels. But Tyler's race, his background, had always been a topic of conversation behind closed doors. Tyler printed the emails and called Amanda. When she arrived, he placed the pages on her desk with shaking hands. "This is it," he said, his voice quiet but fierce. "This is where it all starts." Amanda skimmed through the messages, her brow furrowing as she read. She looked up at him, her face hardening with resolve. "This is a smoking gun, Tyler. We can work with this. We're going to file a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Once it's out there, the company won't be able to ignore it." Tyler nodded, but not of fear tightened in his stomach. The weight of what he was about to do felt heavier now. Taking on Axiom Tech meant taking on McAllister, his allies, and the entire system that had been built to keep people like him at the bottom. But it also meant standing up for something bigger than himself. He was ready to fight, but he knew the battle was only just beginning. The first time Tyler felt the full weight of the backlash was when he entered the office after his formal complaint was filed. The atmosphere was different, thicker, colder. The open-plan workspace that had once felt like a space he could carve out his place in now felt like a cage, with every person who walked by him as if he was radioactive. The quiet whispers behind his back, the side glances, and the occasional awkward silence when he entered the room. It was as if he had already been judged. He could feel the tension in the air, a constant low hum of discomfort that didn't just come from the usual office drama. No, this was different. This was the fallout from a fight he had decided to start. As he made his way to his desk, he saw Sarah, one of his closest co-workers, glance up from her screen. She quickly averted her gaze when their eyes met, a brief but unmistakable shift in her posture. Tyler had known Sarah for over a year. They had worked together on several projects, shared coffee breaks, and traded friendly banter. But now, she looked at him like he was an enemy. A knot tightened in his stomach, and his hands balled into fists. He tried to push it down, to ignore it, but it was everywhere, every moment of the day. At lunch, when he walked into the break room, the conversation around the table fell silent. A few heads turned quickly to avoid eye contact, while others pretended to be deeply absorbed in their phones. He took a deep breath and grabbed his lunch from the fridge, the food tasting bland and heavy in his mouth. He sat alone in the corner, trying to make himself invisible to the people who had once made him feel part of the team. But now, he felt like an outsider and unwelcome presence. Later, his phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Yo, you good? I heard some things. People talking behind your back." Tyler bit his lip as he typed his response. "Yeah, it's bad. I can feel it. They're all scared. They're avoiding me like I'm contagious." He stared at the screen, the words he'd typed feeling like they were written by someone else. Scared. It was true. The whispers, the avoidance, the way people were walking around him as if he wasn't even human. It all came down to fear. Fear of what he was doing. Fear of what it could mean for them. They didn't care about the truth, about what he was fighting for. All they cared about was that his fight was rocking the boat, and they didn't want to get caught in the storm. As the days went on, the isolation became unbearable. Tyler tried to keep his head down, focus on his work, but the atmosphere had shifted in a way that felt impossible to ignore. The silence in the office was deafening, the murmurs of his co-workers just barely contained. His very presence made them uncomfortable. They were too scared to speak up, but Tyler could feel their judgment every time he walked through the doors. Then it happened, the email. Tyler had just returned from a quick meeting with Amanda, where they had discussed the next steps in the legal battle, when his inbox chimed with an alert. It was from Carl Jacobs, the senior VP who had always looked at Tyler like he was a project to be managed rather than a colleague to be respected. The subject line read, "Meeting requests." Tyler clicked open the email, his brow furrowing as he read the contents. "Tyler, I'd like to schedule a meeting with you to discuss some concerns we have regarding your recent complaint. We value your contributions to the team and want to ensure this issue is resolved as quickly and smoothly as possible. Please let me know when you are available for a brief conversation." The words were measured, too carefully crafted to be sincere. The corporate tone was meant to mask the underlying message. "We're watching you. You've made your move, but now we're going to make you regret it." Tyler stared at the email, anger rising in his chest. The subtle threat was obvious. Carl wasn't trying to resolve anything. He was trying to intimidate Tyler, make him second-guess his decision to push back against the system. With shaking hands, Tyler forwarded the email to Amanda, adding a short message. "What do you think? Another attempt to silence me?" Amanda's reply came quickly. "They're trying to make you feel small, but don't let them. This is the pressure they'll use to get you to back down. Don't give in." Tyler's resolve hardened. He wasn't backing down. He couldn't. Not now. The next day, as he walked into work, he noticed a change. Some of his colleagues had stopped pretending, their avoidance slipping into open hostility. The quiet snickers when he walked past, the deliberate exclusion from group conversations. It was all happening right in front of him. The message was clear. Tyler had become a pariah. His fight for justice was costing him everything. His relationships, his standing in the company, even his sense of self. But there was a fire inside him now, a fire that couldn't be put out by whispers or stares. His anger, his frustration, it wasn't going to disappear. He would keep pushing forward, no matter how much it hurt. When Carl Jacobs cornered him in the hallway later that afternoon, Tyler didn't flinch. He stood tall, his shoulders squared, his mind focused on the bigger picture. Carl smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Tyler, I think we need to talk about your complaint. Let's try to work this out. We don't want things to escalate." Tyler didn't hesitate. He met Carl's gaze, his voice steady but unwavering. "I'm not going anywhere. You're the ones who need to change. You've been treating me like I'm invisible, and I'm done letting you get away with it." Carl's smile faltered, but he quickly regained his composure. "You'll regret this, Tyler. The company doesn't take kindly to people who stir the pot." Tyler stood firm, his heart pounding but his words clear. "Maybe it's time for the company to change. Maybe it's time for people like me to stop being invisible." Carl's face hardened, but he said nothing more. Tyler walked past him, his mind set on the fight ahead. The backlash had only just begun, but Tyler was ready for it. He wasn't backing down, and he wasn't going to stop until the truth came out. Tyler sat in Amanda's office, staring at the pile of documents before him. His mind buzzed with a mix of excitement and dread. The formal complaint had been filed weeks ago, but now the company had officially been forced to respond. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EOC, had launched its investigation into Axiom Tech, and the wheels of the legal machine were grinding forward. Amanda sat across from him, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the edge of the desk as she glanced over the latest communication from EOC. Tyler could feel the tension in the room, the weight of what was happening, what was at stake. "They're trying to discredit you," Amanda said, her voice measured but sharp. "McAllister's team is already looking for ways to undercut your claims. They're framing it as a personality clash, an isolated incident, nothing systemic. But we've got them now." Tyler leaned forward, his hands resting on his knees, fighting the urge to pace. "How do we fight this? How do we make them see it's more than just one incident?" Amanda smiled thinly. "It's not just about one incident. It's about the pattern. And we have more than enough evidence to back up your claim. All those emails you found? That's a start. We're going to use every bit of it, along with testimonies from others who faced similar treatment." Tyler's eyes narrowed. "Testimonies? You mean other employees?" "Exactly," she said, her tone confident. "People have been quiet up until now, but with the investigation in motion, they'll start to speak up. There's power in numbers, Tyler. And once they see that they're not alone, they'll come forward." Tyler felt a flicker of hope, but then reality set in. The fear of retaliation, of being labeled a troublemaker, of facing more isolation, gnawed at him. What if they don't? What if no one else steps up? Amanda leaned back in her chair, her gaze steady. "They will. People like to stay safe, especially in an environment like Axiom Tech. But your case has given them the courage to speak out. They see that you're fighting for them. 2, they won't stay quiet forever." The words gave Tyler some comfort, but the fear still lingered. He knew better than anyone how dangerous it could be to speak out. It wasn't just about the law. It was about what people believed, what they were willing to risk for the sake of justice. "Okay," Tyler said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "Let's do it. Let's get those testimonies." The next few weeks were a blur. Tyler had reached out to several colleagues, some he barely knew, others who had worked closely with him. He explained what was happening, what he was fighting for, and why their voices could make a difference. Most of them hesitated, unsure of the consequences. But one by one, they came forward. Tasha, a quiet analyst who had been with the company for just under 2 years, was the first to speak. "I've seen it, Tyler," she told him, her voice barely above a whisper. "The way they look at you when you speak in meetings. It's like you don't belong, like you're just there to make up the numbers." Tyler nodded, the words cutting through him like a blade. He had known it, but hearing it confirmed, hearing someone else say aloud, made it real in a way it had never been before. The next was Jamal, a programmer who had been overlooked for promotion after promotion, despite being one of the most talented engineers on the team. "I've been ignored in meetings for years," Jamal said, his voice tight with frustration. "My ideas are always seen as risky, but when someone else says the same thing, it's brilliant. I've watched you get sidelined, Tyler. You don't deserve that." As Jamal spoke, Tyler could see the toll it had taken on him. Years of silent frustration, of working harder than anyone, and still being overlooked. The fear of speaking out had wore him down, but now he was ready to join the fight. One by one, Tyler gathered the testimonies, each one stronger than the last. He had gone from feeling isolated to feeling like a small spark that was starting to catch fire. People were finally finding their voices. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all of them. But as the testimonies piled up, so did the pressure. McAllister and the higher-ups at Axiom Tech weren't sitting idly by. Tyler had received a few carefully worded emails from HR, offering him compensation in exchange for dropping the case. They had even hinted at a potential reassignment, a way to sweep him under the rug without rocking the boat further. Tyler didn't respond to the offers. He wasn't in this for a paycheck. Not anymore. This was about principle. This was about exposing the truth that Axiom Tech wanted to keep hidden. And it was working. Slowly but surely, the investigation began to gather steam. A pattern was emerging, a clear, undeniable one. McAllister's refusal to promote Tyler, his dismissive attitude in meetings, the biased performance reviews, and the emails between McAllister and Jacobs. Everything pointed to systemic racism within the company. Tyler was making them uncomfortable, and that, he realized, was the first step toward change. The days following the submission of Tyler's case felt like a tense waiting game. Every morning, Tyler braced himself for the worst. The feeling of being watched, the cold shoulder from his colleagues, it all intensified. Axiom Tech had responded to the EEOC investigation, and Tyler could feel the corporate machinery starting to grind its gears. He wasn't just a disgruntled employee anymore. He was now a public target. It started with small, insidious moves, the kind of retaliation that didn't leave bruises, but slowly chipped away at his sense of security. Tyler had been tasked with leading a project, a big one. It was supposed to be a sign that they were taking his work seriously, that they were willing to let him prove himself. But suddenly, his tasks were being reassigned to other people. Meetings where he was supposed to present were abruptly canceled. And when he asked for clarification, he was met with vague responses. "We just thought it might be better if someone else took the lead on this." It wasn't just the work, it was the way the company was starting to treat him. They were isolating him. One morning, he walked into the office and noticed a strange email in his inbox from the HR department. The subject read, "Reminder, Corrective Action Policy." Tyler clicked it open, the content sending a chill down his spine. It was a standard email, one that outlined company policies about workplace behavior. But this wasn't just a reminder. The language was passive-aggressive, hinting that his behavioral concerns were being flagged once again. The email ended with a warning. Continued failure to meet expectations may result in further corrective action, up to and including termination. Tyler's heart sank. This wasn't about performance. They were trying to make him look like the problem. They were trying to force him into a corner where he would either quit or break. But he wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. That afternoon, Tyler received another email, this one from Carl Jacobs, the senior VP who had been conspicuously quiet since the investigation began. He asked for a private meeting, his tone cordial but dismissive. Tyler knew it was coming. He could feel the target on his back growing larger with every passing day. When Tyler walked into Carl's office, the man was seated behind his desk, his posture stiff and calculated. Carl smiled in greeting, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Tyler, thanks for meeting with me," Carl said, his voice smooth, but there was an edge to it. "I wanted to talk to you about your recent actions. The EEOC complaint, the way you've been making waves. It's not exactly the kind of behavior we encourage here at Axiom Tech." Tyler stood there, his arms crossed, trying not to let the man's words sink in. He wasn't going to let Carl control this conversation. "I'm standing up for what's right," he said, his voice steady. "And if you have a problem with that, we'll have to deal with it." Carl raised an eyebrow, as if taken aback by Tyler's response. He leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepling together. "Tyler, I understand that you may feel frustrated, but this isn't about you personally. It's about the company. And let's be honest, you're making things difficult for us. You've been disruptive. This whole thing with the EEOC investigation, it's causing unnecessary stress for everyone. The atmosphere here is changing, and not in a good way." Tyler felt his anger rising. "It's not about making things easy for you, Carl. It's about standing up against the racism that's been happening for years. It's about giving people like me a chance to be seen, to be treated with respect. You can keep pretending it's not a big deal, but it is." Carl's smile faltered, and he leaned forward. "You're not seeing the bigger picture, Tyler. This is a business. We can't afford to have distractions. You're becoming a liability, and I'm afraid that the company just can't afford to keep someone like you around if you continue down this path." Tyler's pulse raced. He knew what Carl was doing. He was trying to intimidate him, to break his resolve. But Tyler wasn't backing down this time. "I'm not a liability, Carl. You're the liability. You're the one allowing this culture to thrive. You're the one trying to push me out because you're afraid of the truth coming to light." Carl's expression darkened, and Tyler could see the mask slip for just a moment, revealing the anger that had been bubbling beneath the surface. "You have no idea what you're up against," Carl said coldly. "You're digging your own grave, Tyler. You think this company cares about a few legal complaints? Think again. I'll make sure you're never hired again. You'll be nothing but a footnote." Tyler's stomach twisted, but he didn't flinch. He held Carl's gaze, his eyes steady. "If that's what it takes to expose the truth, then so be it. I'm not afraid of you, Carl. I'm not afraid of losing this job. What I'm afraid of is losing my integrity, my sense of right and wrong. That's something I'll never give up." For a long moment, Carl didn't say anything. He just stared at Tyler, his jaw clenched. Finally, he stood up, walking around the desk. "You've made your choice," Carl said. "But understand this. No one wins in a fight like this. No one." Tyler didn't respond. He just turned and walked out of the office, the weight of the conversation heavy on his shoulders. As he left the building that day, the city street stretched out before him like an endless road, full of possibilities. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was the only road he could walk. No matter how many threats or retaliations came his way, Tyler had already made up his mind. He wasn't going to back down. He wasn't going to stop until the truth was heard, and the people who had tried to silence him were held accountable. The tension in the office was suffocating. Every day felt like another battle, another attempt to break him. Tyler couldn't remember the last time he felt even remotely at peace. His phone buzzed again. It was Amanda, her name lighting up the screen. "We've got a break. Jamal's testimony is the key we needed. The company's retaliation is real now. This is going public." Tyler read the message again, letting the weight of it settle in. He had known it was coming. The retaliation, the push to silence him. But this was different. This wasn't just about his fight anymore. This wasn't just about him standing up for what was right. This was about a system that needed to be exposed, about making sure no one ever had to go through this again. He quickly typed a reply. "Let's do it. I'm ready." That night, the feeling of inevitability sank into his bones. The case was about to go public, and with Jamal's testimony, it was clear the company had no intention of letting this slide easily. The investigation was about to pick up speed, and the pressure was mounting on Axiom Tech's leadership to act fast, to control the narrative. The next morning, as he entered the office, he felt the shift. The cold shoulder had become palpable, the glares heavier. He could see it in the way people walked by without acknowledging him, in the way his colleagues whisper behind closed doors. There was a new sense of urgency in the air, but it wasn't about the investigation. It was about the fear that had begun to creep into the company's walls. As Tyler sat at his desk, an unfamiliar email notification popped up on his screen. It was from Carl Jacobs. Tyler's heart skipped a beat as he opened it. "Tyler," the email began, "I would like to offer a settlement meeting. I believe this could be a mutually beneficial resolution to the matter at hand. I suggest we meet in person to discuss your concerns. It's better to resolve this internally before it goes further. We can come to a fair agreement." Tyler's fingers gripped the edges of his desk as he read the message again. A settlement? He knew exactly what Carl was trying to do. Try to buy his silence. Make this go away without it ever seeing the light of day. But Tyler wasn't a fool. He had made it this far, and there was no way he was going to stop now. He responded with one simple line. "I'm not interested in a settlement. This goes to court." Tyler's phone rang just minutes later. It was Amanda. He answered quickly, knowing exactly what she was calling about. "We're moving forward with a lawsuit," she said, her voice full of determination. "This is a turning point, Tyler. We've got enough evidence now. Jamal's testimony is huge, and the public is already starting to take notice. We can't let this go to a private settlement. It needs to be seen by the world. Your story, your fight, it's going to make a difference." Tyler took a deep breath, his pulse racing. He had made his choice. There was no going back now. "I'm ready," he said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. "Let's make sure everyone knows the truth." As the days passed, the pressure only increased. McAllister's smug demeanor, which had once felt like a shield, now seemed to crack at the edges. The media started picking up on the story. Articles began circulating about the discrimination lawsuit, and Tyler's name started making headlines. The weight of it all was enormous, and the eyes of the company were squarely on him. But Tyler didn't back down. If anything, the attention only fueled him. He'd been fighting this battle in isolation for too long. Now, the world was watching. There was one moment, though, that stood out more than any other. It was the day that Jamal's testimony hit the front page of the news. It was one thing to talk about bias in the workplace. It was another thing entirely when a senior-level employee came forward with evidence of systemic racism within the company. Tyler stood in front of the TV in the break room, staring at the footage of a news anchor, reading the details of the case. His stomach tightened as he watched McAllister's face flash on the screen, the CEO looking cornered for the first time. Tyler could almost feel the pressure building in McAllister's chest, the desperation seeping through his carefully crafted public image. The anchor's voice broke through Tyler's thoughts. Axiom Tech's CEO James McAllister is now facing accusations of racial discrimination after a lawsuit was filed by former employee Tyler James. The case has sparked conversations about workplace inequality and corporate accountability in the tech industry. Tyler's heart beat in his ears. It was real now. The world knew. It wasn't just his word against theirs. It was a story of injustice that was being told, a story that others have been too scared to share until now. He didn't know how the battle would end, but he knew one thing for sure. He was no longer alone, and the fight wasn't over. The days after the news broke felt like a whirlwind. Tyler could hardly keep track of the phone calls, emails, and interviews pouring in. The media frenzy surrounding the case was unlike anything he'd ever imagined. The pressure, though immense, was now on Axiom Tech, not him. He'd become a symbol, a beacon for the fight against corporate racism, a fight that, for too long, had gone unnoticed. But in the midst of the chaos, Tyler felt a strange calm. The battle was no longer his alone. It had become a collective effort, a movement that had people questioning what they had once considered normal. The lawsuit was no longer just about him and McAllister. It was about every marginalized person who had ever been silenced by a corporation that valued profit over people. Tyler stood at the front of a small press conference a week after the story broke. His lawyer, Amanda, was beside him, her presence calm and resolute. The room was filled with reporters, the air thick with questions. The weight of the moment wasn't lost on Tyler. He had spent years hiding in the background, doing everything right, and yet never once being given his due. Now, here he was at the center of a firestorm, speaking for all the others who couldn't. A reporter stood up, her voice sharp as she asked, "Mr. James, what do you hope to achieve from this lawsuit?" Tyler looked around the room, the eyes of the press staring at him, some skeptical, some sympathetic, but all curious. The spotlight felt heavy, but it was a weight he was willing to carry. He cleared his throat, his voice steady. "I'm here to make sure people like me are seen," Tyler said. "I'm here to make sure that we stop pretending that the systems we work in are fair, because they're not. I'm fighting for the employees who've been passed over, ignored, and mistreated because of their race. And I'm fighting for the truth to be heard." The room went silent for a moment, the magnitude of his words hanging in the air. Tyler knew that, for the first time, he wasn't just fighting for his own dignity. He was fighting for a chance at systemic change. Another reporter raised their hand. "But, Mr. James, don't you think that publicly going after the CEO of such a major company could hurt your career, your future? Isn't this putting everything you've worked for at risk?" Tyler's heart clenched, but he held his ground. "I've already lost my career," he said. "The minute I walked into that office and realized that my work, my voice, didn't matter because of the color of my skin, I lost everything that mattered to me. The only thing I have left now is my integrity. I'm not afraid to fight for that." The room was silent again. Tyler knew that these were the questions that would come, the pushback, the attempts to make him doubt his decision. But the more they pushed, the more resolute he became. He wasn't just a single employee. He was a symbol now, and that symbol could change the world. Later that evening, after the press conference, Tyler met with Amanda at a nearby cafe to debrief. The calm in her expression was a stark contrast to the fire burning inside him. He had never expected to be at the center of this, but now that he was, there was no going back. "They'll try to bury this," Amanda said, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. McAllister is a powerful man. He's not going to give up without a fight. Expect the smear campaign to get worse. They'll attack your character, your personal life, anything they can to discredit you. Tyler nodded. I'm ready for it. But it's not just about me anymore. It's about all of us. Everyone who's been treated like they don't matter. Amanda met his gaze, her voice firm. And that's why we're going to win, Tyler. Because this isn't just your fight anymore. It's everyone who has ever been silenced. It's everyone who's been told they're not enough because of who they are. Tyler's heart swelled with pride at her words. The fight wasn't just for justice anymore. It was for every person who'd been made to feel invisible. For every black man and woman who had to fight twice as hard just to be seen as equal in the workplace. For everyone who had ever been silenced by the weight of an unjust system. The following weeks brought new challenges. Axiom Tech had launched its own counterattack, and the smear campaigns against Tyler began in full force. Anonymous accounts on social media, fake news articles, and whisper campaigns within the company all painted him as difficult, disruptive, and, worst of all, ungrateful. Tyler had expected it, but it still stung to see the words splashed across his news feed, to hear them echoed by former colleagues who once called him a friend. But the more they tried to tear him down, the more determined Tyler became. He refused to back down. He kept his focus on the bigger picture, the fight that was bigger than any one person. He wasn't just going to walk away and let them win. Finally, the moment they'd all been waiting for arrived. A public deposition. Tyler would face McAllister for the first time since the termination, and everything hinged on this moment. His heart raced as he stood in front of the courtroom, facing McAllister, whose arrogant smirk made Tyler's blood boil. Tyler spoke calmly but with conviction, his words measured but full of the weight of years of frustration. You can try to discredit me, but the truth won't be silenced. This isn't just about me. This is about the countless people you've overlooked, the people you've treated like they don't belong. You think I'm a problem, but I'm not the one who's broken. McAllister's face twisted, his eyes narrowing as he tried to maintain his composure. You don't understand what you're doing, Tyler, he spat. You're tearing apart a company that's given you everything. Tyler didn't flinch. You gave me nothing. You took from me. You took my dignity, my voice, my chance. And I'm here to take it back. The courtroom was silent. The weight of Tyler's words hung in the air, his voice a beacon of resistance. The truth was finally being heard. As the days passed and the evidence mounted, McAllister's position became more untenable. The media coverage grew. Public opinion swayed in Tyler's favor, and Axiom Tech faced mounting pressure from its investors, employees, and the media. The walls McAllister had built around himself began to crack, his arrogance giving way to panic. The company's board met in emergency sessions. Behind closed doors, McAllister was forced to confront the fact that his actions were unsustainable. The pressure from shareholders, the bad press, the growing list of testimonies. It all caught up with him. It wasn't long before McAllister was forced to resign. The company issued a public apology, and Tyler's victory was complete. But the cost had been high, too high. Tyler had lost his job, his peace of mind, and part of himself in the process. The victory was bittersweet. Tyler stood outside the courthouse, the weight of it all still pressing down on him. He had won, but the road to get here had been long and painful. The system had fought back, hard, and there had been moments when he wasn't sure he would make it. But he had. He looked up at the sky, his breath steadying. The fight wasn't over, not for him, and not for the countless others who still had to fight for their voices to be heard. But for the first time in a long time, Tyler felt like he could breathe. The aftermath of the lawsuit felt like a heavy fog settling over Tyler's life. The court's decision to hold Axiom Tech accountable for its treatment of him was a victory, but it came with a price. McAllister was gone. The company had apologized publicly, and the media buzzed with stories of workplace discrimination and corporate corruption. But Tyler's sense of triumph was overshadowed by the silence that followed the storm. He had lost his job, the position that had been his stepping stone. The place where he had invested countless hours of his life was gone. Axiom Tech had offered him a severance package, a generous payout to move forward, but it felt hollow, like they were trying to buy his silence. The last few months had taken everything from him, his career, his mental peace, and the belief that corporate America would ever truly change. But as he sat in his small apartment, looking out at the city that had once seemed full of opportunity, Tyler realized that he wasn't defeated. He had exposed a system that didn't want to be exposed. He had made a difference, not just for himself, but for every person who had been overlooked, dismissed, or silenced because of the color of their skin. Still, the emotional cost weighed heavily on him. The constant stress, the sleepless nights, the endless battles. It had all taken a toll. Tyler felt disconnected from the person he used to be, as though part of him had been broken in the process. The victories didn't feel as sweet as he thought they would. The joy of seeing McAllister gone didn't fill the hole in his heart left by the loss of his job. Tyler spent his days reflecting on what had happened. The press had moved on to the next big story, and the noise surrounding the case had died down. But the scars remained. He no longer saw the world through the same lens. He couldn't ignore the institutional biases, the deep-rooted inequalities that had shaped his journey. And while the legal battle was over, the fight for true equality, the fight for justice, was far from finished. One afternoon, as Tyler sat scrolling through job listings, he received a call from Amanda. "Tyler, I got something you need to hear," she said, her voice serious. "We've been talking to some investors, and there's interest in funding a project that focuses on diversity and inclusion in the tech industry. We want you to be a part of it." Tyler's heart skipped a beat. A new opportunity? After everything he'd been through, it felt like a dream, like something out of reach. But Amanda continued. "This isn't just any project. It's a chance to shape the future. We're talking about creating real change, not just lip service. We want to build a platform that empowers marginalized voices in the industry and forces companies to be accountable for their actions." For a moment, Tyler said nothing. The silence between them stretched long, as if he were searching for the right words, for the right answer. But deep down, he knew there was only one thing left for him to do. "I'm in," he said finally. "This is what I've been fighting for all along." The next few months were a whirlwind of meetings, planning, and strategy. The project was ambitious, and the team behind it was determined to make an impact. They were building something from the ground up, something that would change the way companies view diversity and inclusion, not just as a checkbox on a form, but as a central part of their mission and values. Tyler threw himself into work, the fire that had been burning in him reignited by this new purpose. He no longer felt like a victim. He was an advocate, a voice for change, and this was where he could make the most difference. The project was already gaining traction in the tech community, and Tyler could feel the momentum building. But even as he embraced this new chapter, Tyler knew that the scars would never fully heal. The trauma of the lawsuit, the way he had been treated by those he had trusted, it lingered. There were days when the weight of it all felt unbearable, when the isolation crept in again and the doubts resurfaced. Would he ever fully recover from the emotional toll of it all? Would he ever find peace? The answer, Tyler realized, wasn't a simple one. Healing wasn't linear. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened or pretending it hadn't affected him. It was about finding a way to keep moving forward, to keep fighting, even when the road ahead was uncertain. He still thought about the people at Axiom Tech, the ones who had stood by him and the ones who had turned their backs. He wondered if, in the end, they would learn anything from this. Would the company change? Or would it just continue its cycle of corporate indifference, as so many others had before it? But for Tyler, the most important thing was that he was no longer invisible. He had made sure that the world saw him, saw the truth, and understood the cost of turning a blind eye. He had sacrificed his job, his security, and his peace of mind, but in return, he had gained something far more valuable: his voice, his dignity, his purpose, and that, he realized, was worth more than any job or paycheck. As Tyler walked out of the office that evening, looking up at the city skyline, he felt a sense of hope, a quiet, steady hope that maybe, just maybe, the world was starting to change. And with that, he was ready to keep fighting for it. The aftermath of the lawsuit felt like a storm that had passed, but left the air thick with tension. Tyler's victory had shaken Axiom Tech to its core, and the world was watching. McAllister's resignation was swift, and the company issued a public apology. For a moment, Tyler allowed himself to savor the feeling of justice. Finally, The system that had wronged him was held accountable. But that relief was short-lived, overshadowed by the emotional toll that the battle had taken on him. Tyler had won, but at what cost? He had lost his job, the place he had poured his heart and soul into for years. Axiom Tech offered him a generous severance package, a last-ditch attempt to make the matter go away quietly. The payout was substantial, more than enough to keep him comfortable for a while, but Tyler could feel the emptiness that came with it. The money, while appreciated, was no substitute for the years he had sacrificed, the long hours, the emotional exhaustion. As he sat alone in his apartment that evening, the weight of it all began to settle in. He had expected the victory to feel different, but the sense of vindication was clouded by the personal cost. The loneliness was overwhelming, more so than the financial loss. Tyler had burned bridges with so many people at the company, many of whom he had once considered friends. The colleagues who had avoided him after the lawsuit was filed, the whispers behind his back, and the open hostility had all left their mark. The world hadn't just changed for McAllister. It had changed for Tyler too, and not in ways he had imagined. He stared at the walls of his apartment, the silence almost suffocating. The media had moved on, as it always did, the story of a CEO's downfall quickly replaced by the next big scandal. But for Tyler, the reality was still here. The war may have been won, but the battle scars lingered. He hadn't realized how much of his identity had been tied to his job, to Axiom Tech, until it was all stripped away. It wasn't just a place of employment. It had been the manifestation of his dreams, his ambitions. All the years of effort, of trying to prove himself, had led to this one moment. And now, he was left to pick up the pieces. The emotional toll was something he hadn't fully prepared for. The physical exhaustion from the legal battle, the constant scrutiny, the pressure to stay composed, it all weighed heavily on him. The nights had been sleepless, the days filled with meetings, interviews, and strategizing, all while the reality of the discrimination he had faced sat heavily on his chest. The fight for justice had consumed him, leaving him with little space for anything else. One evening, as Tyler sat scrolling through job listings, his phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus. "You doing okay? Haven't heard from you in a bit." Tyler stared at the message for a long moment before typing a reply. "Yeah, just processing everything. It's hard to feel good about winning when you lose so much in the process." Marcus' response came almost instantly. "I get that, but you did something important, man. You made history. This isn't just about you anymore. You've given so many people hope." Tyler paused, reading those words over and over again. Hope. It was a word that had seemed so distant during the hardest parts of the battle. Hope had felt like a luxury he couldn't afford when he was fighting for his job, his dignity, his life. But now, as Marcus' message sank in, he realized that hope wasn't just for the people who supported him. It was for him too. He had been so focused on the fight, on exposing the truth, that he had lost sight of what was waiting for him on the other side. He had been fighting for justice, yes, but also for a future where people didn't have to go through what he had. A future where those who were overlooked and mistreated would finally have a platform to stand up and be heard. The next day, Tyler received a call from Amanda, his lawyer. Her voice was warm, but Tyler could hear the exhaustion beneath it. "Tyler, I've been talking to some people, and there's an opportunity one thing you need to hear about," Amanda said. "There's a new initiative that's being launched, focused on diversity and inclusion in the tech industry. It's a big project, and it's looking for someone who can lead it, someone who understands the struggle, someone who has lived it." Tyler felt a flicker of hope, a chance to rebuild, to move forward, and use his experience to create something positive. "What kind of initiative?" he asked, leaning forward in his chair. Amanda continued. "It's about bringing awareness to the discrimination that still exists in corporate America, especially in the tech industry. It's about creating real change. Companies won't just be able to get away with token gestures anymore. The goal is to force them to be accountable for their actions, and they want you to be a part of it. You're not just someone who's been hurt by the system. You're someone who can help fix it." Tyler sat back, processing what she said. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for. The opportunity to do more than just tell his story, to change the narrative, to create a platform for others who were still trapped in silence. "I'm in," he said, the words coming easily. filled with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. Whatever it takes, I'm in. The weeks that followed were filled with meetings, brainstorming sessions, and plans. Tyler felt the spark of something he had been missing for so long: purpose. His work now had the potential to create real, lasting change. And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was part of something that mattered. But even as the project began to take shape, Tyler couldn't ignore the emotional cost. There were moments when the memories of the past, the betrayal, the isolation crept in, making him question everything he had fought for. The scars from the battle didn't heal overnight. Yet, as he looked at the team he had assembled, people who had been through their own struggles and were now standing together for a common cause, Tyler knew that the fight wasn't over. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about all of them and all the voices that had been silenced for far too long. And with that realization, Tyler knew that he had finally found a way forward, a way to keep fighting, not just for himself, but for the future. Tyler woke up early that morning, the cool rays of the sun creeping through the blinds. The city was still waking up, its streets quiet and empty. But for Tyler, the day felt full of promise. For the first time in months, there was a sense of peace, a sense of knowing where he was going. His fight for justice hadn't been easy, but now, in this moment, the weight of it all felt bearable. The past few months had been a whirlwind. After the lawsuit, after the media frenzy, after McAllister's resignation and Axiom Tech's public apology, Tyler found himself at a crossroads. It wasn't just about the victory anymore. It wasn't just about bringing down a corrupt CEO or exposing systemic racism in the workplace. It was about what came next, the future, his future. And that future was beginning to unfold in a way he hadn't expected. The initiative Amanda had mentioned, the project focused on diversity and inclusion in the tech industry, had come together quickly. The response from investors and supporters had been overwhelming. The project was gaining traction, and Tyler had become the face of it. But it wasn't just about using his name or his story. It was about creating something that would give others the platform and opportunity to succeed, to be seen, to be heard. Tyler had spent so long in a system that ignored him, a system that never valued him or his contributions. But now, he was in a position to change that, not just for himself, but for so many others who have been overlooked or pushed aside because of the color of their skin, their gender, or their background. He stood in front of his mirror, adjusting the collar of his shirt. His reflection stared back at him. But it wasn't the same man who had walked into Axiom Tech all those years ago. The man he saw now was someone who had endured, who had fought, who had won, but who still carried the weight of those experiences. The scars would never disappear, but they weren't a sign of weakness. They were a testament to his strength. Tyler left his apartment and walked to his office, the city skyline towering above him. The streets were alive now, people rushing past, cars honking, the hum of the city a constant undercurrent. But today, Tyler didn't feel overwhelmed by the noise. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. When he arrived at the office, he was greeted by his team. They were all there, people from different backgrounds, different walks of life, but all united by a shared mission. They had built something together, something powerful, and today was a big day. The team was about to meet with several large tech companies, presenting their platform for diversity and inclusion and advocating for real change in the industry. Tyler's role in the project had evolved beyond just being a figurehead. He was leading the charge, speaking to executives, meeting with key players, and showing them what real change looked like. The work was demanding, but it was also deeply rewarding. It was everything he had wanted in his career and more, the opportunity to use his voice for something greater than himself. But even with all the excitement, there was a part of Tyler that couldn't shake the lingering effects of the battle he had fought. The emotional scars of the lawsuit, the isolation, the doubt, those things didn't just disappear because he was now leading a successful project. He had won the fight, but there were still moments when the weight of what he had been through pressed down on him. As he sat in the conference room with his team, preparing for the meeting, Tyler couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come. This was more than just a business venture. This was about changing the narrative in an industry that had long been dominated by a narrow, exclusionary view. It was about giving a voice to the underrepresented and showing that their contributions mattered. The door opened, and the executives from the tech companies filed in. The tension in the room was palpable, but Tyler wasn't intimidated. He had been in rooms like this before, rooms where he had been dismissed, ignored, or silenced. This time, things were different. This time, Tyler had the power. This time, he had the truth on his side. The meeting started, and Tyler stood to present their platform. He spoke with confidence, his voice steady and clear. He didn't just talk about the statistics, the facts, the numbers. He told them about the real people behind the data, the people who had been excluded, the people who had been told they didn't belong, the people who had been passed over for opportunities simply because of who they were. The executives listened. Tyler could see it in their eyes. They were hearing him. For the first time, they weren't just seeing a black man in a suit. They were seeing someone who had fought, who had persevered, and who had something important to say. The conversation shifted. It wasn't just about the industry's flaws anymore. It was about the solutions. It was about what they could do to make things right. By the end of the meeting, the room was buzzing with ideas, with plans for action. The executives were on board. The platform was set to launch in the coming months, and Tyler's team would be leading the charge. It was a monumental step, one that Tyler knew could change the industry for good. As the meeting ended, Tyler stepped out of the room with a sense of fulfillment that had eluded him for so long. He had come full circle. The fight for justice had led him here, and now he was part of something bigger than himself. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was a leader, a change maker, someone who had the power to shape the future. But even as he walked through the office, his mind racing with the possibilities, Tyler knew that the fight wasn't over. The work ahead was just as important as what had already been accomplished. The system had been broken, but it wasn't fixed yet. It would take more than just one project, one initiative, to change the culture of an entire industry. It would take persistence, commitment, and time. Tyler wasn't naive enough to believe the work would be easy. There would be setbacks, challenges, and people who tried to undermine what they were doing. But for the first time, he didn't feel overwhelmed by it. He was ready for whatever came next. He had been through too much, fought too hard, to let anything stand in his way now. As Tyler walked out of the office that evening, the sky darkening overhead, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had found his purpose. And with that purpose came the understanding that the road ahead, though difficult, was one he was prepared to walk. The fight was far from over, but Tyler knew that with every step, with every decision, he was making a difference. And that was enough to keep going.